Extinction Rebellion is known for their large-scale actions that shock the public, like their public die-in in the middle of the ice skating rink in Rockefeller Center. Today, we have a representative from Extinction Rebellion to talk about how the group is organizing in this time of coronavirus and why they believe the climate crisis why they believe the coronavirus is also an environmental issue. Jack Baldwin is a writer based here in New York. He's been an activist for 20 years. So Extinction Rebellion is not just for people who are, 15 to 25, which sometimes the mainstream media reports. He joined Extinction Rebellion in December of 2018, shortly after their formation here in our fine Big Apple City. For that organization, he's currently part of the media and messaging working group within Extinction Rebellion. He's popularly known by the nickname RebelJack. RebelJack, thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
So can you talk about how Extinction Rebellion as a group, can you talk about how y'all see the coronavirus in relation to the climate and environmental crisis? Are they connected? Are they separate catastrophes that we're living through at the same time?
They're both connected and analogous to each other. Okay, we don't know how this pandemic started, but nobody in government can claim that they couldn't see this coming. The rich definitely knew that pandemics were a thing, were a threat, and that we would eventually have this. And when forests, for example, degrade, animals exit the forests and become more in contact with humans, and disease transmission is much more possible. So we don't know if this pandemic was caused by that, but future pandemics may well be caused by that process. But it's also similar. It's similar in its global reach. Now, I've been through emergencies in the past, but they haven't been global. I was here in New York during Hurricane Sandy, and I was here in New York during Occupy. And Hurricane Sandy, that was on the Eastern Seaboard. So people on the West Coast and, in other countries, obviously, they could sympathize with us, but they weren't going through them themselves. They weren't going through it themselves. They didn't have the personal experience. As far as Occupy is concerned, that was worldwide, but people who were not involved in the movement, just sort of shrugged it off when it was brutally suppressed. This is everybody in the world. And so people know what a global crisis is because of this pandemic, because of COVID. And so it's much easier to imagine the climate crisis as a global crisis, as one that affects every human being on Earth.
So you think that's kind of a plus coming out of this for the environmental movement, so that people don't just say, oh, it's a hurricane, or, oh, it's one tornado. They can see and get a sense of what a global pandemic is, or what a global issue is.
Whether they understand that this kind of pandemic can be caused by environmental issues, they can see that that global disaster is possible, and it becomes easier to imagine.
What is Extinction Rebellion's response to the crisis? How are you organizing activists given the challenges of gathering people right now?
That's an interesting question, because as you know, most of our activities have been in your face direct actions, marches, demonstrations,
laying down at the Christmas tree in Rockefeller Center.
Right.
The big banner. Beautiful.
That was our first one, and we've done many more since then. We protested the New York Times. We protested.
Why would you ever protest the New York Times? What was that one about?
I don't know, that wonderful radical paper, the New York Times. But no, seriously, they pride themselves on their climate coverage, and their climate coverage is in many ways better than a lot of other news outlets, but it's not good enough, and it's not. It doesn't tell the whole truth about the seriousness of this crisis. And that's one of the things we did. We protested the New York Times. We had the boat drop outside of Times Square, And now we've had to move that creativity underground, so to speak, and do that online. And that's what we've been trying to do.
I was thinking it would be a good idea for everyone who has sort of some semblance of outdoor space to remember those cows that they used to put in New York City, those art cows, just something that will bring up people's awareness. The boats, we could put them, a boat with the year that it's supposed to be flooded at that time, right? So, an 8-inch sea level rise in whatever year that's supposed to be, put that boat on someone's front lawn or outside somewhere so that people start wondering, what are these boats about? And start asking questions, just to do something tangible that can still be done with art. Even if we can't put our bodies out there at this point. I will volunteer my front yard until my landlord asks me why I have a boat in our front yard. But until then,
we are doing things with art. We're still doing banners. We're going out into into the ghost town that's New York now, and with banners and keeping social distancing from one another while doing that. And that's one of the things we're doing. We've done a lot of social networking, podcasts going on Facebook, Twitter, etc. Just keeping in touch with everyone who is concerned about this problem, because I think for most people, particularly most young people, they understand that the climate crisis hasn't gone away during this time of extreme emergency, health emergency. So they understand that. So we're communicating with them, and we've been fairly successful doing that.
Well, whoops, I think there's an audio issue. Extinction Rebellion recently put out a guidebook for organizing and getting through the difficult time called Alone Together. There's a hashtag, Alone Together. Can you talk about that? I noticed that not only does it have ways to plug in, but has resources for supporting each other emotionally during this difficult time. Why is it so important for organizers to provide this?
We have something called Regenerative Culture, and it's something, we've become accustomed to grief because of the climate crisis. We're trying to deal with an emergency that should have been serious action should have been done 40 or 50 years ago. Okay, we're 40 or 50 years late dealing seriously with this crisis. So we have to deal with our grief, with our sorrow for ourselves, our fellow humans, for other species, and for the earth in general. So we are used to doing that. And we have a podcast in which people in Extinction Rebellion talk about the experience of dealing with COVID and the grief involved with COVID, and how similar it is to climate grief. Mm-hmm. So we're trained, so to speak, in how to deal with that, and reaching out to people and helping people cope with the grief that they're feeling, grief and confusion and frustration.
What is the podcast called? Because I personally could use that myself, because that grief around the climate is oppressive all the time, every day.
Yeah, I had sent you an email before. Maybe you haven't this morning, and maybe you haven't received
I know
it.
We had such a tight turnaround. My associate booked, or excuse me, my assistant producer booked you, and I saw that email come in, and I just didn't have time to look through it other than what we already put together to ask you. But yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, the podcast is called Love and Rage. Okay, that's our Extinction Rebellion's podcast. And we had one on April 24th called Climate Voices in the Corona Storm, in which we talked about, what it was like. And then I guess our experiences are very similar to other experiences, other people's experiences, but it's in the context of our own experience of the climate crisis and, how to deal with grief. So it's very helpful to have those testimonies, and it's very helpful to reach out to people.
We're going to play that on our Twitch channel, actually, right after we're done. with our
Okay.
Facebook show here. So we'll
Thank you
play
very much.
that particular episode. I appreciate you pointing that out. Again, the podcast itself is called Love and Rage. It's the Extinction Rebellion podcast. So I'd suggest getting that, and let's get on. Are you part of that podcast team, Jack?
I'm part of Media and Messaging, which handles the podcast. I'm not a coordinator for that particular area, but I'm looking to contribute my own contribution to the podcast, eventually. But we have a whole team working on it right now, and we have some more podcasts in the pipeline that we're going to be loading on pretty soon.
What's the scallywag around the water cooler or the pond, shall we say, in Extinction Rebellion about the fact that it's been a month and a half since people have been staying home, and as was reported today, off the shores of Puerto Rico, you have bioluminescence for the first time in decades. We've got animals living in the canals of Venice for the first time in decades. Yeah. We've got, that the Earth is actually coming back to itself faster than.
That's definitely a positive factor. But I feel personally frustrated because I'm going, if I go shopping or something, I go out in the street. And the air is cleaner. It's beautiful. I'm wearing this stupid mask on my face, and I can't breathe. I can't breathe the clean air. I'm breathing through this mask, breathing my own carbon dioxide. So it's a positive, but it's frustrating too. But I just read something which is very thought-provoking: is that carbon emissions have only declined by something like 5.5%. We need to get them down 7.6% every year, to have any hope of staying within 1.5 degrees Celsius. And that means not only cleaner air, cleaner water, but stop burning fossil fuels. That's the key to everything.
Another question that I'm just springing at you that we probably weren't prepared for, but if you could, Michael Moore has a new movie out where he, takes to task some of the, frontline for the past few decades groups that have been fighting for environmental justice. And he points out that really he believes that Extinction Rebellion is, and groups like Extinction Rebellion are the ones who, the fight is really in the hands of groups like yours. Have you seen the film? Could you make a comment?
I haven't seen it. I don't feel qualified to make a comment. I've heard a lot of negative things about it. I'm not sure that I will see it. A lot of people say it's a waste of time to see it. It does. I don't think the climate. I don't think the environmental movement is sacrosanct. I don't think it's above criticism. But I'm not sure. From what I've read, I'm not sure the criticisms are fair. I'm glad that the documentary says favorable things about Extinction Rebellion, but we don't see ourselves as the saviors. We don't see ourselves as the only legitimate voice in the climate movement. And we did do in Earth Week, we did do a collaboration, a coalition with many other groups to take action on during that week. So we are willing to work with other groups.
Well, that's good. I haven't seen it either, and I know there's been quite a bit of controversy. I've seen the first little bit, but I guess we'll just see. I think we watched a little bit of it here on our Twitch stream on act.tv. Jack, what can people do who want to get involved with Extinction Rebellion? If they're watching and they want to get involved right now, what's the first step? They can listen to the podcast, but if they want to get in the action, what's the best way to go?
The first thing to do is attend a Headed for Extinction talk. And I'm not sure what the schedule is, but I'm sure there are online Zoom, or whatever talks for this, Headed for Extinction. That's the first thing to do. When you attend one of these talks, there's a slideshow, there's a presentation that describes what's going on and how Extinction Rebellion deals with it, and
And then
what
immediately go
she
listen to the
does.
podcast about grief because you're going to need it.
You're going to need it. You're going to need that podcast. But there's also hope too, because we're getting together to do something about it. Okay.
Absolutely.
So it's a negative and a positive, but that's definitely the first step, is to attend those talks, and you can go on our website and find out when those are scheduled.
That's great. Thank you so much. Jack Baldwin, I appreciate it. Any final thoughts for people to keep in mind as we, continue to both try to bring the idea that the climate crisis is a global crisis and needs the kind of swift or an even swifter response that the coronavirus called for?
I have several things to say. First of all, is that things that we phrases that we use for COVID can be adapted to the climate crisis. We're talking about flatten the curve, and now we can talk about flattening the climate curve. Okay, that's a concept that people can understand. The second thing I want to emphasize is that the climate crisis is now. The monster is not at the door, the monster's in the house. So we have to deal with the monster in the house now. The third thing is Greta Thunberg's quote, which is that every day is Earth Day. Earth Day is not a special day. Every day is Earth Day. And we have to dedicate ourselves to saving life on this planet.
A question just came in from the chat asking about why the Extinction Rebellion has often been collaborating with the police. Do you know anything about that?
What you're saying sounds very sinister, the way you say it. But I mean,
well, that's how it came in. It did sound a little sinister.
It's just that when you do nonviolent civil disobedience, you have to coordinate with the police. To sometimes we surprised the police. We had the Times Square boat drop action. The police did not know about it, but at other times we work with the police to make sure that all these activities are nonviolent, that there are no mistakes on either side, and that coordination is necessary to maintain that.
I think, okay. So this is, there is a poster out of London. So Jack is here in New York. So I'm not sure if Jack is going to be able to talk about that, but there's a, hold on. I'll actually share the screen so you can see it. Jack.
Yeah, please.
You'll be able to make a direct comment on this particular banner that that's being asked about. Can you see that banner, Jack?
Yes, I can see it.
Yeah. Do you know what this is about?
Metropolitan Police both work for a safer London. I think that this was something from last year, that people in XR UK worked closely with the police on various actions. They got cooperation from the police, and they showed their appreciation to the police. That was controversial, in some quarters, and a lot of people feel that is insensitive to, people who are minorities and who feel that they are abused by the police, which we know they are. And we do appreciate the police in Extinction Rebellion, but the police are not our partners in this. The police are doing their job, and we're doing our very different job. And
well, it'd be great to have, your skull's not cracked by the police so that you can go out and continue to do the nonviolent direct actions that you do.
Yes.
So it is kind of a tightrope, especially here in New York City.
Yes. So as I said, people, what Extinction Rebellion UK did was controversial, but basically our position is we will coordinate with the police, but the police are not our partners in this. We're not there to toe the line, the law. We have to break the law to do nonviolent direct action.
Have you found that the police in New York City are at all friendly to your cause?
That's an interesting question. I can't read their minds, but we've had fairly good relationships with the police, I would say. But they we want, when we do a direct action, we want them to arrest us. That's the goal. So and we our we have antithetical aims. We're prepared to go against the law to obey a higher law, and the police are there to enforce the letter of the law.
Sure, but I've
And
seen it
the
enforced with
consequence.
billy clubs, and then I've seen it enforced with just light putting you into the, they play a recording that they're going to pick you up, and then they nicely pick you up and put you in the paddy wagon. I've seen that too with direct action. So there's a
Yeah.
different, they can be as forceful as they
I'm
desire.
glad that they haven't responded to us with billy clubs, but at the same time, our we felt, some of us felt that it was very controversial to for Extinction Rebellion UK to have taken that stance of.
Well, let's move off of that one because I think you answered the question there.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to see how the police, were the difference between how the police are handling handling the Occupy movement under a different administration versus how they, under the de Blasio administration here in New York, how the police are handling other direct actions that are happening. So,
Yeah.
the directions come from the top. So, although they seem to hate de Blasio. Anyway, that's a whole nother story for another day.
Yeah.
Jack Baldwin, activist with Extinction Rebellion. Thanks for being on the program with us. You can find the hashtag for the handbook that's part of Extinction Rebellion's response is at Alone Together. You can also find the podcast called Love and Rage, which sounds amazing, and I give great title, and I can't wait to go listen. We're going to listen after this on our Twitch channel. We'll listen alone together on our Twitch channel, and you can follow Extinction Rebellion on Twitter at Extinction R. Thanks again, Jack. I appreciate it, and I hope you'll come back and be with us again.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being on.
Have a great day. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel here at act.tv. I'm Julianna Forlano. We bring you interviews all the time, every day. And if you like, the full show, not just interviews, come and find us on Facebook at 10 a.m. Eastern time. We are live like we are right now, or on Twitch, which we are live. Act.tv is live from 9:30 a.m. Eastern time until, let's say 4 o'clock in the afternoon, sometime around there, as long as we can keep our staff talking and bringing you the kind of content we know you like.